Today I'm going to be watching this video. It's called 10 Differences Between Schools in the US and Sweden. I thought this would be a good video to learn about the Swedish education system, Swedish schools. It's a topic I've definitely got an interest in learning more about, and I thought comparing it with the US would be quite a good way to learn about it, see the differences, see the comparison. And yeah, if you're from Sweden, tell me what you think about schools in Sweden. What are the good things about them? What are the bad things? Just tell me more about the education system in Sweden in general. And yeah, let's watch this one.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this episode, we're going to be talking about 10 ways that Swedish schools are different from American schools. The first thing to know about Swedish schools is they have an extreme lack of qualified educators here in this country. So as an American coming from the States with a master's in teaching, it was very, very easy for me to find a job here in Sweden. And actually, having worked in 2 different schools, both schools were very, very easy to apply for and actually get the job. So if you're qualified to work with kids, it's really, really easy to get a job as a teacher over here. And that is one thing to consider. When you're around the schools, a lot of times they have to bring in long-term substitutes and have people work at the schools that aren't necessarily qualified teachers to fill in a lot of roles because teachers are in such high demand here in Sweden. In terms of grades, Sweden...
Yeah, tell me more about that. I didn't realise there was some sort of teacher shortage in Sweden. Is there any reason for that? Are the demands with regards to qualifications and experience higher to get a job? That's why maybe there's not as many qualified people for the jobs. Is there just a lack of interest in becoming a teacher in Sweden? Tell me if this is relatable to you, if you can see that. Tell me if you're a teacher in Sweden, what's it like to be there? Are they highly paid, low paid? What's the situation, and yeah, why are they so lacking in the amount of teachers there?
Swedish schools are much, much different than American schools. And the American way is much simpler in my opinion because we use points and percentages. If there's an assignment and you get 9 out of 10, you've got 90% on that assignment. And over the course of a term, you'll have lots of assignments, and your overall percentage of what you've got, of the total points, is going to determine your grade. In Sweden, it is completely different. It's based on a rubric system. So basically, the Swedish government has a list of skills that the students need to accomplish, and if they are able to accomplish a skill at a certain level, we fill in the bubbles. So almost every skill has 3 levels, and in each level you can fill in a yellow, green, or red if the student hasn't accomplished that skill yet. So that is one thing to keep in mind, that the grades are completely different, and it took me some time to wrap my head around it because I first looking at this grade book going greens and yellows and reds and different levels, and I'm like, how am I supposed to give this kid a grade, an A, B, or C? And essentially, for a kid to get an A in a class, they need to have all greens at the advanced level of a skill. If they cannot do every single skill on the rubric at the advanced level, then they cannot achieve an A in the class. Also along the line of grades, students can actually get an E grade here in Sweden. They've got A through F, which includes the E, and in America, we do not have an E grade. It's just A through D, and then F means fail. Another difference...
So yeah, tell me what you think about the comparison there. Obviously, the US system seems very focused on testing, hitting certain numbers and things like that, whereas the Swedish one looks a bit more flexible and could be maybe more dependent on what the teacher actually thinks, how the child's actually doing. So tell me what you think the benefits of each system are, the disadvantages of each. Which do you think is better for what reason? When he mentioned it bases the grading on skills, what does he actually mean by skills? Is that ones that a teacher can visually see them do, or is it based on like exercises and testing they do as well?
Difference that is different here in the schools in Sweden is that the student schedules are much, much different than what you might be used to in America. In America, it's much simpler. Like in high school, for example, you've got 6 classes a day, each one's an hour long, and you go to the classes, you go class to class, and then you get done at the same time every day. Well, that is not the case in Sweden. The schedules here are all over the place. They can be really, really confusing to navigate until you get used to it at first. But essentially, the schedules The kids can get out at different times every day. They can have different breaks in the middle of the day for different amounts of time. So it's a lot less structured and the same every day like it is in American schools. The kids have a variety in their schedule where it is basically a different schedule every day over the course of the week. And to
Yeah, tell me why is that the case? I think being from the UK, our system is probably more aligned with the US system. We have that 6 classes per day, all for 1 hour, and it's the same time every day, all the lessons and so on. How do they even organise the Swedish one? Like, how do you do that? Is it like a new schedule every week, a new timetable? What is the benefit of that as well? Do you have time where you just don't have classes? Does the end of your day change every day?
To go along with the scheduling in Sweden, it's actually the teachers that move from class to class, and the students are usually housed in a single classroom. And that's completely the opposite back in the States, because usually teachers have their own room in America, and the students will go from class to class visiting each teacher. So it is a different way of doing it. The teachers, basically their home base, they have teacher rooms. I'm grouped right now in a room with 5 other teachers, and that's where we go between lessons or when we have our planning time. But as a teacher, I actually prefer to have my own classroom, so that is one thing that I prefer about the American system, but there are definitely advantages to doing it both ways. One thing that kind of surprised me about Swedish schools, and in particular private schools, is at Swedish private schools, the students do not have to pay to attend. It's actually illegal to charge students for school at the lower grades. So all of the private schools are funded by the government, and the government actually gives the schools a certain amount of money based on how many students are attending the school, which was kind of mind-boggling for me, because in America, most times private schools are very, very expensive, and just that is one difference that kind of took me by surprise when I first started working in the Swedish school system. In terms of my situation,
Yeah, so if that's the case, if private schools don't have any charge, what's the difference between a private school and a public school in Sweden? What would make you choose one over the other if they're all free? Is it a similar level of education? Is there different syllabus in each of those? As he mentioned, in the UK, similarly to the US, it's very expensive, and usually private schools are known for having a higher level of education, more things, more subjects and so on available to the students. Is that the same in Sweden?
Specifically being a PE teacher, there are a ton of activities that we're doing here in Sweden that I never had training in America, and that I never did in school as a student, such as a lot of the winter activities. We've been able to do ice skating with our class, a lot of nature activities like going hiking in the woods and being able to orient yourself. Swimming is a big part of the PE curriculum here in Sweden. Dance is a big part of the curriculum here in Sweden as well for PE. I never remember having a lot of dance going through school myself in my own PE classes, but I actually had to teach dance at my previous school. So there are a lot of things that are different in terms of the curriculum, and especially some of the winter activities. Having to teach ice skating, I've got a lot of students in my class that are actually better at ice skating than I am, because I've only done it a few times in my entire life, and I've got several hockey players in my class that are just skating circles around me. But you just learn to adapt and make the most of it. But it's been a really, really cool journey to teach some different things that I would have never had the chance to teach in America.
Yeah, that sounds very cool. Like, definitely in Scotland we don't have all of those winter sports, don't have things like ice hockey or being able to go into the woods and do orientation and things. So sounds like great exposure for children. Tell me if it varies in Sweden, like in the big cities. Are you still able to do all of these things, or are these more like remote based schools that have access to bigger areas and different things that you can do these? And what's your favourite type of sport to do in PE in Sweden that maybe other countries don't do?
When I interviewed for my new job, the principal had talked about one winter safety activity where the students are actually going to have to jump into a hole in a frozen lake and learn how to climb themselves out. And she said that I would have to teach the students that.
Oh.
For those of you that know me,
Did
you
you
know
do
that
that?
I'm not really good in cold weather. So that's something that I'm not really excited about doing, is jumping into a freezing cold lake. Maybe you'll see a video of me in the future having to to teach that to the students. But yeah, it was really surprising at first. I thought she was actually joking on the interview, but it turns out that she was completely serious. So that is something that I will be teaching at the schools here in Sweden: water safety and how to rescue yourself if you happen to fall into a frozen lake. Now, one thing that has absolutely surprised me about teaching here in Sweden is the amount of planning time that teachers get. In America, teachers basically get one period or about an hour a day to plan all of their lessons. And in Sweden, the contact time with the students is only about 20 hours every week. So there is a ton of time as a teacher here in Sweden to plan lessons and just go all out and really make those lessons as good as possible, because you have a ton of planning time. You can do grades, you can read into the students, check in how they're doing, send emails, which is really, really nice that that time is built into the school day. And for example, on Tuesdays, I do not have a single class. The entire day, every Tuesday, is just to plan lessons. So that is something that I absolutely love about teaching in Sweden. You do get a lot of planning time, which is completely mind-blowing compared to what I was used to back in the States.
Is that normal for every teacher? I guess that's a very good thing. It just allows teachers to have more time to plan, which in turn allows the lessons to be a lot better. If teachers are rushed in making that making those plans, it can maybe make the quality of lesson lower. So actually giving this is just a brilliant thing, and I think it like really shows that the difference between not just the schools in US and Sweden, but just the working culture in these two countries as well.
As a first-year teacher, the pay is about comparable to what I'd be making whether I was teaching in Vancouver, Washington, or Portland, Oregon, where I was obtaining my master's in teaching credentials. The pay is just about the same, but one thing to consider is that the taxes here in Sweden are much, much higher overall than what I would be paying back in the US. So I actually would take home more money in the US, but then again, you also have to consider the cost of living, and I would probably be spending a lot more money in the US compared to the living situation that I have here. I'm able to afford this apartment at a much cheaper rate than I would be paying to live in Portland or Vancouver, my hometowns back in the US. Another thing, since we're talking about money, in Sweden, the teachers actually have a lot of bargaining power to negotiate their own salary. And this is something that I was completely unfamiliar with, because in America, they basically pay you according to the salary schedule, and you don't really have a lot of room to ask for a raise or say that you think you deserve more money based on the work that you've been doing. And in Sweden, pretty much all of the salaries are negotiated. And with that in mind, because teachers are such an in-demand profession, they do have a lot of bargaining power, and they're able to earn more money in a lot of instances. And in my case, I feel like I'm being paid very, very fairly for a first-year teacher. And so the money that they offered me, I didn't feel like I needed to bargain a much higher salary. But in the future, if I continue to do a good job and I grow and become a better teacher over the years, that is something that's really, really nice to have that option to ask for a higher salary, because in the US, you pretty much get what you get, and you don't really have a lot of say or a lot of ways of increasing that. So that is something nice that I really appreciate, is that ability to negotiate and represent yourself and ask for more money if you think that you're deserving of it. And the last thing, and this is one reason why I absolutely love teaching in Swedish schools, is lunch is completely free here. It's free for the students and the teachers. And coming from America and someone who didn't like to prepare lunch early in the mornings, I would basically a lot of times bring nuts and fruit and whatever I could find lying around the fridge. That would basically be my lunch every day in the States. And here in Sweden, I've been lucky that both schools I've worked at have had amazing school lunches, absolutely amazing. Yeah. And the students actually eat with the teachers all in the large cafeteria. So it's really, really nice. You can talk to the students, bond with them a little bit, and enjoy the free food, because it's absolutely excellent. And that is one of the highlights for me teaching in Sweden, having that free lunch. So with that being said,
yeah, that was really interesting as well. So is that the case for every student in Sweden? It's free lunches for everybody? I guess it's a great benefit for the teacher as well. Don't have to think about that, and also get the healthy lunch. But for the students especially, that's fantastic, especially if students are eating such healthy food, don't have to pay for it. That's just kind of blown my mind. Is that true? Is that the case for you? Tell me what you think about that. Tell me what you think about the differences between schools in the US and Sweden, and how Swedish schools were for you in your own experience. Thanks.